Hello guys, this is session 15 and today we will learn about Lewis representation of a molecule. Objectives. Today we will learn to define what is the Lewis dot representation of a molecule, learn how to draw it, practice solving exercises, and receive an assignment by the end of the session. A Lewis dot structure is a two-dimensional model that represents bonds as straight lines and unbonded valence electrons as dots. بنشوف هون باللويس structure إنه في عنا البوند بنرسمه as خط وعنا الانبonded valence electrons اللي هن الالكترونز ما بيعملوا bonding بنحط النقط. Bonds are formed by pairs of valence electrons called bonding pairs. هذا البوند هو مؤلف من شيء اسمه bonding pair اللي هو بيجي initially من free electrons belonging to different atoms بيعملوا interaction مع بعضهم بيصير عنا شيء اسمه bonding pair وهذا bonding pair بيعمل covalent bond اللي نحنا بنشوفه هون. Pairs of electrons that are attached to only one atom are called lone pairs. Lone pairs are the electrons that do not form bonds. Okay, so each two electrons are called a pair. So for this chlorine, for example, we have 1, 2, 3 pairs, 3 lone pairs. Atoms are most stable when their outermost shell is filled or in the octet state, means they have 8 electrons, except hydrogen, of course, that has a maximum of 2 electrons. So كل الatoms اللي نحنا عنا إياهن بيعملوا هيدول البonding ليصيروا in the octet state. For example, the chlorine, as we can see it here, it has 7 valence electrons, so it is not octet. It needs 1 more electron, and so does this chlorine. So they make a bond where chlorine now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they share both these electrons contained in this bond, and so does this chlorine. It also has 8 electrons, so they are both octet. Now, how to draw a Lewis dot structure for a molecule? Let's take H2O as our example. So H2O consists of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. First, we calculate the total number of valence electrons. We have 1 plus 1 plus 6 equal 8 valence electrons. Step 2, we find the number of electrons needed to make the atoms octet. So hydrogen needs 2 atoms to become full in its outermost shell, and oxygen needs 8 to become octet. So 2 plus 8 gives us 12 electrons. Step 3, we determine the number of bonds in the molecule. The number of bonds is determined by this rule. So the number of bonds equal the electrons needed here minus the total number of valence electrons divided by 2. So 12 minus 8 divided by 2 gives us 2. So we need 2 bonds to draw the Lewis representation of H2O. Step 4, choose a central atom. A central atom is the one that can form the most bonds. So we see here in hydrogen we have 1 free electron, so it can form just 1 bond, whereas oxygen has 2 free electrons. Note that these two are not free electrons, they are lone pairs, and lone pairs cannot form bonds. So it has only 2 free electrons that can form a maximum of 2 bonds. So oxygen can form more bonds than hydrogen, so it is our central atom. And the final step would be to draw the Lewis structure and fill with electrons. So we place oxygen in the middle and connect the free electrons together to form covalent bonds, and this would be the final Lewis representation of H2O. In double and triple bonds, first we consider carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide consists of 1 carbon and 2 oxygen atoms. We start the process. We have total valence electrons is 4 plus 6 plus 6 is 16 electrons. Electrons needed to become octet is 8 plus 8 plus 8, 24. Number of bonds would be 24 minus 16 divided by 2 is 4 bonds. The central atom is the atom that forms the most bonds. So we have oxygen has 2 free electrons that can make bonds. Lone pairs do not make bonds. So we have oxygen can make 2 bonds, where carbon has 4 free electrons, so it can make 4 bonds. So it can make the most number of bonds, thus it is our central atom. So we place it in the center. هون بنشوف إن الأكسجين عندها 6 valence electrons والأكتت بدها 8 valence electrons، فمضطرة تعمل 2 bonds مع الكربون، ونفس الشي بهيدا الأكسجين. So بيطلع عنا الفورم هيك. هون بنشوف صار عنا شيء اسمه double bond وهون صار عنا شيء اسمه double bond. So we calculate the total number of valence electrons now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for the oxygen. Same thing for this oxygen, so they become octet, where carbon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 also becomes octet, so this is correct. And the total number of bonds would be 4. In this case, we have hydrogen cyanide. Hydrogen cyanide consists of H, carbon, and nitrogen. These are the Lewis structures of all three atoms. Also, we start the process calculating the total number of valence electrons. So 1 plus 4 plus 5 equals 10. Electrons needed is 2 maximum for hydrogen. So 2 plus 8 plus 8 is 18 electrons. The number of bonds we subtract and divide by 2, so we end up with 4 bonds. And the central atom would be the atom that forms the most bonds. We have hydrogen makes only 1 bond since it has 1 free atom. Carbon has, one free electron. Carbon has 4 free electrons, so it makes 4 bonds. And nitrogen has 3 free electrons. This is not a free electron, this is a lone pair, and lone pairs do not form bonds, so we have only 3 free electrons, so they make 3 bonds. Okay, so the highest number of bonds is made by carbon, so it is our central atom. So we place it in the center. We notice that the hydrogen تعمل 1 bond with carbon, correct? So this is خلاص, it is filled, but these are not filled. النيتروجين بدها 3 more electrons والكربون كمان بدها 3 more electrons. So هون بصير نحن مضطرين نعمل شيء اسمه a triple bond. بيصير total number of valence electrons للكربون 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 وللنيتروجين 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, so it becomes octet. Summary: a Lewis dot structure is a two-dimensional model that represents bonds as straight lines and unbonded valence electrons as dots. Bonds are formed by pairs of valence electrons called bonding pairs. Pairs of electrons that are attached at only one atom are called lone pairs. Atoms are most stable when they are in their octet state, acquiring 8 electrons, except for hydrogen that has a maximum of 2 electrons. Steps of drawing the Lewis representation: 1 would be calculating the total number of valence electrons. 2. Calculate the electrons needed. 3. Apply the rule to calculate the number of bonds. 4. Choose the central atom. And 5. Do the Lewis structure with filling the electrons. This is your assignment, and you're done. See you next time.